that post-food lethargy.
Agreed.
That's what we're bringing.
The post-food lethargy, I combat that with just like getting medical grade caffeine and stirring it into a cup of water.
Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. I am drinking strawberry daiquiris that I made. So
Oh,
that's gonna
nice.
keep me nice and juiced up. This is the trial run. I'm bringing the ingredients to a barbecue next week, and I'm gonna
Oh, nice.
blow that shit up daiquiri style.
I'm reporting you
Yeah, I'm
to
having just a
reporting you
beer. So
reporting you to UK to terrorism watch. The terrorism nonces to for saying
Our
you're gonna
specially designated anti-terror pedophiles, yeah.
that you said you were gonna blow up a barbecue with your daiquiris.
Hell yeah. Honestly, if they fucking come into my house and they find these daiquiris, I'm going straight to jail because they're gonna know they're bomb as hell, man.
Yeah, that's right. What's up, Fredda? How are you doing?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing good. I didn't sleep much, but I mean, I never do. So I'm also loaded up on caffeine and I'm having a beer, having a good time.
Oh,
Excellent.
healthy brain, is it?
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
I also spent all of today just like editing, so my brain is kind of fried as well.
That's
Oh,
you're
nice.
in the
With it,
perfect
yeah.
the perfect mental realm for podcasting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Just
should have
brain
done that,
off.
but I went to a magic tournament instead because I'm
Like an IRL
on it.
magic tournament?
Yeah, I won.
Nice. Were you drunk
Yeah.
at the time or did you get drunk after?
No, but I would have still won if I was. Because, in fact, I would have won harder because of these daiquiris. Can't stress enough.
I'm gonna be real with you, Kay. I've watched several of your Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude or anything, but you are constantly getting curb stomped by people online.
Well, that's because they have a rank system where you win a bunch and then you get to the
I
people who are
see.
way better than you, and then you can't fall down in rank very much, so you get up to a point and you just start getting the shit kicked out of you.
You can't
That
just
makes
go to like
sense.
tournaments and play against 8-year-olds all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, eat it, just screaming in the face of a crying 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that would be so good.
Just like,
That's what I want.
I'm better than you. I'm better, and it's just like in this fucking kindergarten full of children.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Kay, on being king of the baby puzzles.
That's right. Yeah, I screamed in the face of all the small children, and then I went and tried to hit on their moms, and it didn't work because they saw they saw what I did. But
Nice.
But yeah, see, the trick is to watch my Magic streams right after the season resets. When I'm making my way up, that's when all the winning happens. And then I should stop streaming. Everyone will think I'm really good at it.
That's a good idea. Just space out those streams so that people see you working your way up the ladder, and then the second you lose a single match, you're like, okay, let's play a different game.
Yeah, time for a different game. Fuck, that's a really good bit. I might start doing that. And then if I die in that game, I'll just be like, time for a different game.
Yeah. You just like cut the stream like the second before you die, and you're just like, oh, well, I would have won that, but let's switch to something else. I'm bored of that.
Yeah, I'm tired of this actually.
Yeah. I didn't want to play Magic that much, actually.
I might do that next time.
Well, excellent. I'm excited to start this episode because rarely have we had such a good lineup of stories and guests, I think.
I'm
Yeah,
ready to
I
go
have
ape
many
shit on this
thoughts
one.
on
I don't know
this
about
stuff.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
sweet.
Excellent.
I got a fan blasting at me. Is it coming up on the mic at all? Because it's
Not.
fucking hot.
Yeah, I've heard. I've heard the UK is having a really nasty heat wave.
That's right. It was a sweaty, sweaty Magic tournament. Let me tell you.
Oh boy.
Oh,
I
boy.
don't want to imagine that.
Yeah,
Just
things got spicy in there.
dozens of unwashed nerds just sweating
They had
in
several
100
like
degree
industrial-sized fans desperately trying to, keep things under control. It was
blasting
very
the
fun.
cards off the table.
They were aimed kind of upwards, but there was like a cyclone at head level, kind of.
Jesus.
It was awesome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. I'm Alton. With me, as always, is Kay.
Yo.
Unfortunately, Reese could not be here due to medical reasons, so please send all your love to Reese and send emojis of hammers to Matt Walsh and all of other Reese's various enemies. And joining us today is Fredda. Hello, Fredda.
Hello.
So I wanted to have Fredda on because very recently a story has come out about this game called Ecumene Aztec, which is basically a Assassin's Creed game set in the Aztec Empire during the Spanish invasion. And recently, like I said, there was this story about how Ecumene Aztec basically got like a whole bunch of far-right pushback on the base premise of the game, which is essentially that you are an Aztec warrior fighting against the Spanish invaders. And a lot of right-wing people got very butthurt about that and basically like sent enough death threats to the developer to like, okay, we'll add it so you can be on the side of the Spanish.
Yes, and it's so funny the way they frame it as well.
Yeah, and you were tweeting out like a whole bunch of stuff about that, and I think at some point I learned that you were a history major, and I was like,
Yes.
this is perfect. We'll have not just one, but two history perverts on the pod.
This is really the most academic podcast on the internet, I've always said.
just to dissect this situation, which is really odd. So I've got an article here from I don't speak Spanish, so I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation on all this, but El País English, which goes over the situation of the game, which is really bizarre. So it's a game about a South American pre-colonial empire, right? And it's being made by Polish game developers.
Yes. The Polish are notoriously cool about race, so I'm fine.
Especially in their video games.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah. I better pull up the article that talks about how really they did change like the entire game's premise to appease nationalists.
Not only that, they like basically made it so they have to make like a second game.
Yeah.
That's what was most striking to me is the concession that they're making seems completely impossible for them to actually meet. You know, like without massively extending their release plans like potentially years. This is
and
not a
their
big
release
studio.
plans aren't even clear. Like there have I don't know if it's been clarified now, but when this stuff was blowing up, there were like figures saying, okay, it's releasing in 2023, someone said, and they had at some point said 2024 and also 2025.
Yeah.
So, and also they didn't have a website, I think, at the beginning, so none of this was communicated officially.
Let me read some of the snippets from the article from here on El País. The video game by Polish developer Giantscraft Games has generated positive and negative comments from Mexican users and others around the world. In Mexico, opinion is divided on whether to applaud something fresh and different or to criticize the, quote, inaccurate portrayal of pre-Columbian civilization. On the other side of the pond, some radical groups didn't like players acting out the role of an indigenous Mesoamerican murdering Spanish soldiers and bought the company's unregistered domain. They turned it into a disinformation site that glorifies Spanish imperialism and presents images linked to fascism and the extreme right wing. Viewers of the website are greeted by a quote attributed to the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez and a giant image of the Cross of Burgundy, heraldry linked to Spanish ultranationalists. The only link on the website is to an Instagram page with a post suggesting that Giantscraft did not reserve the giantscraft.com domain, and an opportunist swiped the domain after a preview of Ecumene Aztec was released. The Instagram page describes Ecumene Aztec as a, quote, new video game based on the conquest of America where users play an Aztec warrior who, with dubious historical rigor, massacres Spaniards in the purest Assassin's Creed style. Contrary to history, this game portrays Spaniards as murderers, looters, slavers, and ruthless genocidal killers.
Oh yeah,
End
totally
quote.
contrary.
Contrary to history, yeah. None of that happened.
So the
It's
scale of
yeah.
historical denial, obviously nothing new for fascist freaks like this, but it's quite impressive. You know, I think a lot of the time they'll instead say like, no, it was right for us to do these things for X and Y reason. To just say, oh no, they what killing people, enslaving people? Nah, come on, like
Yeah, no,
that's bold.
that
Europeans
never
would
happens
never
in
do that.
conquest, war, killing people. Nah, like it's so strange because like everyone knows this was a conquest. There was a siege of Tenochtitlan and all that stuff. I don't know if I
Oh yeah,
pronounced that correctly. Probably not. But they're saying, you know, no, there wasn't any war, there wasn't any killing, and then some of them are saying, well, okay, but they deserved it because of all the human sacrifice, which is, you know, the logical extent or the logical sort of conclusion when you say that, okay, yeah, it did happen. And then they go on to saying, oh yeah, but there were only like a couple of conquistadors. It was mostly like infighting, which I'm sure, you know, the arrival of the conquistadors and them giving weapons to people and sort of stoking ethnic divisions never had any sort of influence in how that escalated.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Obviously they don't want to they're Spanish nationalists. They don't want to talk about like the actual stuff that happened.
There's like a ton of stuff to get into with this. Like,
Yeah.
there's a couple more bits in the article I wanted to talk about because lower down in the page it says other critics derided the game's portrayal of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Mexican Empire, which depicted it as a decaying and gloomy jungle. Navarrete, who has a doctorate in Mesoamerican studies from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, says that the setting echoes other representations of the Aztecs and Mexicas as, quote, human sacrificers. He points to Apocalypto, the film by Mel Gibson about the decline of the Mayans, and the, quote, infamous Manlinche musical by Nacho Cano, a production that he says is, quote, full of lies, historical biases, and fascist ideology. Quote, the setting seems very vague. Manlinche presents the Aztecs as a jungle people, which I also see here in the video game, that has more to do with the racist prejudices of Europeans who associate the jungle with savagery. If they wanted an accurate representation of the Mexicas or Aztecs, they could have depicted the Chinampas, an agricultural system featuring artificial floating islands, and the aqueducts in Tenochtitlan as big cities like Cholula and Zempoala. But instead, the game setting is much more primitive, says Navarrete. So that was interesting to me in that from everything we've seen from like the gameplay trailers and stuff, it is very much like, yeah, Assassin's Creed set in a jungle when,
yeah,
you know, I think
and ruins.
Pretty famously, a lot of these South American empires had a massive, you know, they had like cities with like 1 million people on them. They were very clearly agricultural in nature.
Yeah, like
Tenochtitlan, it might be pronounced Tenochtitlan. I don't remember. Sorry to Quetzalcoatl. It was larger than any European city at the time.
Like the Europeans, like the Spanish conquistadors and stuff, when they arrived, they said it was like the greatest thing they had ever laid eyes on. Like nothing like this existed in Europe. They were blown away.
They were marveling at it, and some of them highlighted how fucking colorful and beautiful everything was. It did not look like the shit in the trailer.
This is what all of like the people who study this that I interact with are so fucking pissed about, because like the dress of the main character is very boring and drab and not even representative of like what someone, at least like a warrior, would have worn. The painting of the buildings and everything, like it's all sort of representative of like, yeah, these like primitive quote unquote ruined like imagery, I guess, that one associates with past civilizations often.
That's what it looks like now after it's been destroyed and like the jungles come back to reclaim it.
Yeah, that's what it evokes, right? Is it evokes how these things look now. It makes you think of the ruin of this civilization, not of what it actually was, which to me feels like this inherently racist kind of way to look back on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the guy should have been dressed like fruity as hell. He should have had like big, bright feathers and stuff. Like, it's all wrong. He's no plumage. That's a cucked warrior. No plumage.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
There's some stuff that was highlighted by artists and stuff. Obviously, like people who are listening can't see any of this, but just to like describe again, feathers and stuff all over the place, like cloaks and things. Yeah, big plumage. This like big like beak thing on their head and stuff like that. Like all this, all these artists who have been studying historical references in order to make these fun, authentic, I guess, is a word you could make or a word you could use, depictions of this. I got so pissed at how boring this looked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a wasted opportunity because this is a society with first of all, aesthetic sensibilities that are so different, but also like feathers were very valued despite being quite a perishable good because they had such a decorative and ceremonial sort of centrality in this civilization. And it's like they simply are valuing physical items that we don't at all. That's such a great opportunity for design and making things look unique and interesting in a video game that are just not taken advantage of.
And it rules that this is just like some fucking Polish people somewhere is like, what's South America like? Jungles, maybe?
Yeah, I couldn't find it, but someone in my Discord talked about how these guys had made like 2 Unity asset flip games or something in the past, and this just sort of accidentally probably blew up, and they were not prepared for any of this.
Probably not. That's probably why they buckled to all the fucking fascist pressure because they were like, "Oh God, we can't. We don't want to be getting this volume of death threats. Actually, this sucks."
Yeah, they were like, "We'll just do both, right? Like everyone will be happy."
Yeah.
At this point in the article, it talks about how they made an announcement on Steam saying that the users would be allowed to pick a side in the new version. And I wanted to read this.
Yeah,
I wanted to read the quote straight from the Steam page because
it's
holy
so
fucking
good.
shit, it's insane.
It's insane. It's mad.
Actually, you know, I bet I should give someone else the opportunity to read this while my dry mouth recovers. Who would like to read the image.ping?
Oh, I'll read it. All right. So the Steam description for Ecumene Aztec is the great Tenochtitlan is on fire. Now that the war is broken out, I must choose whether to join our compatriots to repel the invaders, or to join the newcomers who want to liberate us from the priests sacrificing our own brothers and children.
Yeah.
So we should talk about Aztec human sacrifice a bit, because I feel like that's something I found really interesting was how quickly reactionaries latched onto that as a talking point, like very consistently. And it kind of reflects the language of like Tumblr era social justice. The way they're talking is like, actually, the Aztecs were problematic. Like, it was a big yikes how they were sacrificing human beings. And I found that very interesting. Even our fascists fucking act like this now. It drives me up the goddamn wall.
It's insane. It's
But also, so here's my thing. Human sacrifice, morally justified. What do we think?
Yeah, sure. Why not? No.
yeah.
I don't
I
give a
can
shit.
get down with it.
Anyway, the thing, the thing about this to me is that if I'm remembering like my world history correctly, the entire system of human sacrifice was set up that they wouldn't sacrifice just like random women and children. They would do raids on enemy tribes and like capture warriors and sacrifice them. So this was like enemy combatants mostly.
So a lot of it was they had the Flowery Wars, but there were other. It's a bit of a contested thing amongst historians right now, whether certain specific rituals were using combatants or people from the city, but a lot of them were definitely using captured enemy combatants. And it's really important because it's also reflected in the way Aztecs fight. Like a lot of their weapons are to sort of disable and capture, not to kill. This starts to change when the Spanish show up fighting a very different type of battle, obviously. But it's not just random massacres. It's a pretty rigid ritual system that works in specific ways for specific reasons. And the more you learn about it, the more it becomes impossible to view this as some like bizarre, savage, like horror movie, cannibal tribesman behavior. This is a pretty sophisticated civilization.
Yeah.
Despite how some people want to color it.
Also, this thing about in general with human sacrifice in past societies and stuff is that a lot of the time, the times in which they have done it get sort of conflated in this like one narrative about this one civilization being this one thing, when these things could have happened under very different circumstances over very different time periods. And it's something you see in like every situation like this, like the human sacrifice in Carthage, for example, which probably was like an act of desperation, and human sacrifice in like in Norse religion, which was not as pronounced as it is depicted in some video games, for example, by Paradox, or in media, stuff like that. It's all sort of taking this very diverse culture over a long span of time and sort of distilling it into like an essence of what you like and what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of debate about how often the Aztecs were sacrificing. It was something they did with some regularity, but the scale of it is often massively exaggerated by Spanish sources. And one of our best sources is Bernardino Sahagún, who himself gives these kind of hard to place accounts. Like he will start talking about a ritual, but as he's talking, he'll start going into what is clearly a different ritual without sort of signposting that, and it becomes hard to say if a single chapter is really pertaining to just one event or multiple events. So it gives this
the original like I was in a liberal coffee shop of like
Yeah.
historical
I mean, a lot
accounts.
of what he wrote is from what other people have told him as well. So it creates this thing where you can read this chapter of what this guy wrote, and all you're hearing about is these instances of sacrifice, and it can be easy to then project that onto how you think about the civilization, where this is just what they do. It's a very decontextualized way of looking at it that I think a lot of people have, because I think if you just ask a random person, that's probably one of the only things they know about the Aztec Empire. So I feel like this whole weird controversy that shouldn't have been anything was really feeding on that as well.
What a shock that right-wing reaction feeds on ignorance. That's a new one. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Crazy.
Can I like talk about like an aside that I had happen that was really funny?
Sure.
Relating to this, because I obviously when they first announced that you would be allowed to play as both sides, and of course they framed it in a very strange way where they were like, oh, okay, you can join the conquistadors and fight the caste of sacrifice-making priests, or join the Aztec warriors to repel the quote-unquote newcomers, which was very funny framing. And I was like, okay, I don't think anyone like wanted this exact thing. And I had one of my followers quote tweet me and say something about like, okay, in this new World War II game, you'll get to play as Hitler. And that got picked up by that like delusional takes account.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Which
one of the worst gimmicks accounts on that on the site, which is saying something all.
It sucks. I mean, it's just like a way of like sort of stealthily showing people, sometimes very silly people who they disagree with, and sometimes real actual funny takes, and then sort of framing it all as bad in order to like get people to automatically disagree with this kind of stuff when they see it in their day-to-day life. But the thing that then like happened from that was that I quoted to that with like sources about how the Spanish, specifically in this period, are the reason we have our modern conception of race and racism.
Yep.
And also like how they killed so many people in their conquest in America that they literally caused the Little Ice Age. Mm-hmm. And I immediately got blocked.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really funny.
Because I think I got like close to ratioing him, and that led to a block immediately.
God, I fucking can't stand these dipshit reactionaries. There was something, not to get too off topic again, but Juniper has been doing her thing where she's been like replying to the quartering Jeremy Hambley and just like absolutely fucking destroying him on like the likes ratio. And this fucking dumb whiny man child is like, she's using bots. It's so obvious that she's using bots.
These people are so fucking thin-skinned, despite their, the image they want to project. It's really, really obnoxious.
Yeah, Not to again like go even further into the tangent, but I'm going to anyways. Have you guys seen the thing where he like on a live stream got so drunk he like pissed on the floor?
Oh, I kept
I've
seeing
heard of it.
references to that in his mentions. It's like, go piss in a basement, basement pisser.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen that, but that sounds very funny.
He really needed to go, so he couldn't get up and go anywhere else, I guess.
Yeah, there's one last thing I want to wrap up with this particular story. This is a snippet from like a different article, but I like the framing of this one better. In a statement made through its PR, the developers of Ecumene Aztec said the change in scope was due to asks from the community. Quote, "It was not planned. However, we saw that about 40% of the audience says that they would like to have the choice to join the conquistadors, so we might actually try to give this possibility. The game is not political in any way and never will be. It is history fiction," all caps.
There's nothing political about my Holocaust
Nothing
video
political.
game.
There's absolutely nothing political about this. Please don't look at the people telling us to change it. And I just want to say about this that Poland is definitely not beating the screen door allegations with this one.
Yeah, this is such Gamergate bullshit. This is so fucking 2014 to be like, this is not a political video game. Don't get mad at me about doing
no
politics
politics in my games, please.
I mean,
yeah,
there's like a certain like threshold level where I think it's acceptable to say that it's not your game's not really that political.
Yeah, if you're playing like Baba Is You or something.
But you're saying this about a game in which you fight as an Aztec warrior against the Spanish Empire? I don't know, man. That sounds kind of political to me.
I feel like if you're playing in a game where you're in a war in general, you kind of just like the non-political angle just goes straight out the window.
Yeah, especially like a historic,
you can't say that.
real life conflict that happened. It's not like the elves and dwarves have been fighting for 500 years. You can't abstract that away.
Yeah, and it should be said that the Spanish, even discounting the invasion and genocide in Central and South America, they already have no moral high ground here. Like, these Spanish nationalists are so fucking goofy. Caroline Pennick, really good historian on this subject, I think, makes a point that I have been trying to sort of make, because I think it really contextualizes what's happening in this conversation. The Inquisition was happening at the exact same time as, and throughout pretty much the entire colonial invasion and post-invasion process in Latin America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they are torturing and killing people, or, well, handing them to the secular state to be killed. Technically didn't do it, wink wink.
Yeah.
I love the Inquisition. They're so full of shit. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes a really great point, which is that they are also, killing human beings, and then, going and writing about how savage and scary the Aztecs are for killing human beings.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Aztec sacrifices are believed to go to sort of the best, most glorious afterlife, the same one that the warriors go to, whereas the Inquisition is condemning heretics. If they're condemned to death, they're going to hell. 100%. They think they're going to hell. And I think I mentioned this, Alton, I think to you off pod a little while ago, but I just think there's an argument for a dramatically different moral sort of evaluation between these two. I think one is so much worse than the other because of that belief. The idea that the Spanish are civilized against the savage sacrificers is ludicrous.
Yes, like it's very ironic and fucked up that just like months before Columbus landed in the Americas, Spain expelled its Jewish population.
Yes,
and in like the years following, they started setting up like systems and local laws, ordinances, and such that required that you have a sort of sort of blood purity pass that showed that you did not have any Muslim or Jewish heritage in order to occupy certain positions.
This is why the Nazi comparisons are completely appropriate and I would argue necessary, because I'm my big sort of beef forever is people who want to like uphold Nazism as this unique special evil that it's inappropriate or disrespectful to compare to other sort of political, factions or countries or whatever. But it's this is Nazi shit.
Yeah,
Agreed.
straight up.
Fuck Spain.
Yeah.
Spain
The EU hasn't
sucks,
fucked
dude.
them over enough. Let's get them some more.
Fucking
Fuck
Spanish Empire. You got so much gold, your stupid ass empire collapsed. That's how dumb you were.
Owned.
Idiots. Owned.
I would have simply not lost to the British in a naval battle because, of weather.
Ratioed.
Ratioed by the Queen.
Horatio Nelson. I think that was a little before Horatio Nelson. But,
yeah, a little bit.
No, don't worry about it. That was it.
He's timeless. He's timeless. It's good.
That's right.
Anyway, tying in to history, what it is, and how we can stop it from happening.
Fucking hate history. Let's stop it.
I hate it.
We must stop it.
Fukuyama is a lying.
He's right.
A lying. No, he's a lying bitch.
Now.
He's a liar.
Yeah.
He said it would be over. It keeps happening.
There's still history, folks. I'm seeing history every day.
I'm seeing history being made every day. And that motherfucker told me it was over and I didn't have to learn anything more about it. But luckily, there's this great game developer called Paradox Interactive.
Let's go.
That we can all learn our video game history from now.
Absolutely. I learned everything I know from them.
Yeah, me too. I learned that like Hitler was just an idiot. He could have won that war so easily if he had just known these 5 weird tips that allies don't want you to know.
Yeah, bro. If I was Hitler, though, something I consider like 5 times a day, this is what I would have done.
I'm always thinking about Hitler, how Hitler could have won. I'm putting myself in his shoes all the time, and nobody should look at me suspiciously for that.
I'm just trying to figure out the most optimal way to complete the Holocaust. I don't know why everyone's looking at me like I'm being weird.
I'm trying to do any percent on a Nazi victory in World War II,
no.
and people are just looking at me like I'm the weirdo. But this is a topic we've had on our back burner for fucking ages, like just over a year since we added it to the Trello. And it's been something I've been wanting to talk about as time goes on, because more and more we are seeing people whose ability to think about history in any other way than a map painting game is being just eroded from them by playing these Paradox Interactive games.
In their defense, there are some military historians who treat it that way as well. So they are joining a proud tradition of dipshits. And I love that for them.
Alton, first, if I could just ask, did you know that my YouTube channel was like all about Hearthstone 4 Let's Plays for like a year or 2 when I started? Before you invited me on here?
I did not know that.
That is so funny.
It fits perfectly, I think.
Yeah. Everything I do now is to sort of like repent for that, by the way.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the first video that stuck out to me was, like I said, the Dwarf Fortress Communism video. But then, like, going through your videos, I 100% think, like, a while ago, I saw the Halo Cursed Edition.
Yes.
Because the blurred out Thanos cock, it sticks in your memory. But I didn't even realize that was you, because I watched that so long ago.
Yeah, no, that's like my most successful video. I had to watch a lot of Thanos cock unblurred when editing that. And then I had to watch it again when I realized I missed some of it, but luckily YouTube didn't realize. I'm very glad YouTube has this system where you can go in and blur stuff in post.
Yeah.
That's useful. There's a lot of Thanos cock in my videos. They haven't noticed.
Yeah.
It seems like you have like a lot of expertise destroying your brain with Paradox Interactive games. So I'm curious, before we get into this article that we have, what your experience with that has been like.
So like over the course of 1,165 hours of Hearthstone 4,
Oof.
Jesus Christ.
and yep, and doing YouTube with that stuff, I've seen firsthand the kind of conceptions people get about history through these video games, and there are some good things to be said about these games in terms of what they can teach and what they sometimes do teach about history. But there's also a fuck ton of bad stuff.
Mhm.
And one of the big things about Hearthstone 4, for example, and also a big thing about European Universalis 4, which touches on the like Aztec stuff because it relates to the period in which the Americas were colonized, is that these games have no way of like dealing with and telling you about the really bad stuff that happened
Right.
without basically giving the fascists a way to like do wish fulfillment and all that stuff. It's telling that the most, I believe, well, actually, maybe the second most popular Hearthstone 4 mod is one called The New Order, which is basically a visual novel in the Hearthstone 4 engine, which takes place in a world where the Germans won World War II, and it's like the 1960s. And there's just like a fuck ton of genocide, a lot of like really edgy shit going on. Like there's people who are now self-identifying by the fictional ideologies in that mod
Oh boy.
that I'm like finding on the internet. Like and these people are obviously like 14 years old or whatever, but it's not good.
Yeah, personally, I identify with the communist faction in the My Little Pony Hearts of Iron mod.
Oh yeah.
Obviously.
Obviously. That
God, that
one.
mod is so fucking funny.
Was it Hearts of Iron 4 that just does not mention the Holocaust?
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah. And it's one of
The
those things
closest-
where it's like I get why. I get
Yes.
why. I just wouldn't make the game if you're thinking about like, is this gonna be distasteful? Maybe don't make the game.
Yeah, I don't know. It's obviously like a tough situation they find themselves in. But like the fact that they then kind of do it by having these like policies in terms of how you like deal with occupied territories, where I think you can do forced labor as like a policy in occupied territories,
Right.
and that kind of like touches on it, but doesn't actually like recognize the actual stuff that's going on, is kind of making it worse in my mind.
Right. Well, it boils down, complex ideologically driven history into a system of purely mechanical decisions that give advantages and
Yes.
disadvantages versus things that, a lot of countries did that gave them no advantage whatsoever, but were just sort of shitty.
There's a fun part about the ideology system in that game where you're either a democratic government, you are a fascist government, or you're a communist government, or you are unaligned. And
A secret
unaligned
fourth
governments,
thing.
yeah, secret fourth thing, and that secret fourth thing encompasses everything from I think like I'm not sure. I think anarchists fall in that for some reason in the Spanish Civil War. I'm not sure. And the German Empire falls in that if you restore the Kaiser somehow in that game. A lot of like autocracies that aren't explicitly like fascist or whatever fall in that. And it's all because of this like mechanical system where they want certain nations to play well with each other. They want Japan and Spain, like Francoist Spain and Italy and Germany to ally. So they are all fascist. They want, Stalin to, I guess, I don't know, like how many nations arise naturally in that game that are communist by their definition. But they want America and Britain to join forces, so they are quote unquote democratic, that kind of stuff. And it's just like a very strange oversimplification of like any sort of like political analysis of ideology.
Right.
That doesn't lend itself well to understanding anything, and it creates situations where people are like, well, you are this thing, or that thing. And there's no democracy in communism because they're not democratic. There's no, liberal democracy in fascism and vice versa because they're different things.
Yeah.
It's, as you said, this like sort of mechanical way of looking at things.
Right.
It reminds me a bit of political compass brain, right? Where
yes,
just this completely like segmented off and not reflective of reality way of thinking about political models. It's great. It's been really constructive for us.
But anyway, let's get into this article. I think this article is really good. This is Kids Are Learning History from Video Games Now by Luka Ivan Jukic. from the Atlantic, hiss spit, but it's actually a pretty decent article. I was thinking that because it's an Atlantic article, I thought like the conclusion was going to be the problem with video games is that they are not anti-communist enough. But that was not the conclusion, thankfully. But to get into it, last year, Nicholas Mulder, a history professor at Cornell University, asked his Twitter followers to help him understand a certain kind of student in his classes, players of the video game Europa Universalis. Students kept enrolling in his course on modern Europe because of the game, which he had only recently learned existed. Brett Devereaux, a history professor at the University of North Carolina, saw Mulder's tweet as an opportunity to explain a new phenomenon. Devereaux plays a Europa Universalis and likes it, but the fact that the video game developers, rather than professional historians, were responsible for shaping so many young people's understanding of history deserved greater examination, he thought. The games made by Paradox Interactive, the Swedish studio that produces Europa Universalis, are among the most popular strategy titles in the world. Millions of people own the game, which allows players to take control of a historical nation or individual and guide the course of history. The average Europa Universalis player spends hundreds of hours on it. Some spends thousands. But spending...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got one of them right here. Spending that much time engaged with any sort of historically themed content will affect one's understanding of history. And yet, to many players, exactly what they're learning from these games remains a mystery. Devereaux aimed to correct that problem. Academic historians, he wrote in a 4-part post on his blog, must now grapple with a new breed of students, quote, for whom paradox is the historical mother tongue and actual history is only a second language.
That's such a good line.
Do you guys know how to like tie a noose? I'm not really good with rope. Something interesting that Paradox does by presenting itself as kind of alt history is the things it takes as a given in a way I think get more naturalized. Like for example, me and someone else ages and ages ago tried to do a game in EU4, I believe it was EU4, where we played as North American indigenous factions and tried to prepare to fend off colonization, basically. Right. And what you will find doing that is you reach kind of a brick wall. I think they may have expanded on these factions in DLC since, because this game is
it's
insane
better,
amounts of DLC.
Oh yeah.
At the time, you hit a wall in technological development, and you have to westernize, and it's called westernize, in order to keep.
Which is kind of weird because, you know, North America is already pretty Western. Even more Western than Europe, actually. So,
yeah, all it means is that the trajectory that they have to become more like a Western European civilization is set in stone no matter what else happens. So when you present this as an alt history where you could theoretically form like a Uruguay fucking nation that, you know, fends off Europe and becomes a big chunk of North America or whatever, you're still doing it through this process that's basically what happened anyway, where you take on these Western characteristics and change fundamentally as a society. And I think that's very interesting. It's in the things that don't get to be played with that I think they do the most ideological sculpting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they basically create like a railroad essentially, or with many tracks you can go down, but it's constrained in terms of what could have been possible in the history that they teach you.
Yeah.
There are a couple more quotes in the article, if you don't mind me going back to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
In the next paragraph, some time ago, we passed the line where historical video games are at the same level of influence and demand the same level of critical analysis as historically themed movies or TV shows, Devereaux told me. But despite the fact that PC gaming industry is now twice the size of the movie industry, many games have evaded such analysis. That is such a common fucking thing. Like, like video games are such a huge industry, and despite gamers claiming for so many years and losing their shit at like that one movie reviewer saying that video games weren't art. What was his name? I'm completely blanking.
Yeah, who did that? I don't remember.
I remember the whole like conversation being a big thing. One that I was like, I kind of did not give a shit about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, obviously there are, but like,
Yeah,
I
like
don't care that much. You
yeah.
guys seem really mad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pick up a football.
Yeah, I
It was
pick up a
Roger
football, perhaps.
Ebert.
Was it Ebert?
Yeah.
Oh man, fucking awesome.
Oh, I want to read the quote here because it's really fucking funny.
Yeah, do it.
Video games could never be art by Roger Ebert, April 16th, 2010. Having
Get
once
'em.
made the statement above, I have declined all opportunities to enlarge upon it or defend it. That seems to be a fool's errand, especially given the volume of messages I receive urging me to play this game or that and recant the error of my ways. Nevertheless, I remain convinced that in principle, video games cannot be art. Perhaps it is foolish of me to say never, because never, as Rick Wakeman informs us, is a long, long time. Let me just say that no video gamer now living will survive long enough to experience the medium as an art form. Oh, fuck. That's really funny.
God, he rules. He rules. I love that.
There's a massive fucking article underneath it that we really don't need to get into, but like, that's the thing about video games is like, the second you try to apply the same level of critical analysis that is applied to basically every other art form on Earth to a video game, you have like this massive contingent of unwashed man children who freak the fuck out at you and basically start a harassment campaign.
Yes.
Yeah, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want the medium that they've constructed their weird little identity around to be respected, but not treated like art in the ways that matter.
Right.
You can't be critical of it. Don't you dare call it a text. I will fucking post your address online. It's really weird. And
let's
the
say
quote,
hypothetically, you made a video essay about a video game called The Legend of Blora.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
Yes. Yeah. You might have what some would consider to be man children extremely upset at you for being critical of such a video game.
Gamers are the only thing worse than cartoon adults, which is, who got mad at me about the Korra ones.
Sorry, I just remembered that beamed something back into my brain that I'd forgotten about. I think one of my earliest big interactions with this sort of like paradox brain thing came from when Crusader Kings 3 was announced, and there was a big old controversy, as there is in the gamer universe, about the allusion by the developer, like just the hinting at the idea that maybe when the Crusades were launched, they would not use the words Deus Vult.
Oh no!
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, and this is like getting into some dark territory, which can be cut if need be. But the phrase Deus Vult, being that they are a Scandinavian developer, had not many years prior been very explicitly evoked by a terrorist, a far-right fascist terrorist in Norway, in his attack on left-wing youth activists or youth labor youth members.
Yeah, anti-brevs.
Yes, exactly. So the idea that they would maybe want to not use that term, which is also explicitly tied to the very origin of racism in the Middle Ages, is very understandable. But when I said, maybe it's okay that they don't use this, people fucking lost their shit in the comments. And it was one of one of the early videos that I had that got a lot of views. And I didn't really experience that until that point where I had directed gamer rage at me.
Oh, it's the best, isn't it?
Something fascinating you learn is that the vitriol with which you say something or the controversialness of a given statement is not what matters. What matters is if it relates to a property that attracts the sort of people who get mad online about something like that. You know what I mean? You can be as even-handed as you want. They won't care. They are there to freak the fuck out about whatever they can.
Yeah, they're they're having a good time. They're shitting their diapers as loudly and publicly as possible for all the world to see, and that's their they get off on that. That's what they love.
Yeah, it's their prerogative. But one big thing about that was that from what I can tell, the term Deus Vult wasn't very widely even used in the time period.
Right.
I believe it came up, and there are sources that say that when Pope Urban II called the First Crusade, people chanted Deus Vult, like God wills it. But I don't think it's like necessarily that tied to the Crusades. However, in Crusader Kings 2, it was tied very heavily to the Crusades because it popped up in the event text every time the Crusades began or you went on a crusade.
Mm-hmm.
So in their minds, the term Deus Vult has a deep connotation or a deep connection to the history of the Crusades because the video game made them think that.
Right.
So would you say then that decision in Crusader Kings 2 is a big part of why fascists today consider that to be like the slogan, basically, of the Crusades? Would you
I
say
don't
that's
think
largely that?
I think I don't think the fascists got it from Crusader Kings in that way, but I do
Okay.
think that because the like Deus Vult thing and Pope Urban II is one of the earliest examples of like a very clear situation where an authority figure uses very racialized language.
Oh yeah.
And that is why they're using that, because immediately after Saint Bernard of like famous as like the patron saint of racism, aka the patron saint of the Knights Templar. So he Saint Bernard basically had to defend the existence of the Knights Templar because Christians at the time were like, hold on, it's kind of weird that we have murder priests. I don't think this is in accordance with the Bible. And in that like defense of the Knights Templar, he was like, okay, it's okay because they're fighting this like homogenous other group who are all actually not even human, because they are the embodiment of evil on earth. So if you kill them, you're not actually killing a human. So you're not actually violating like the teachings of Jesus or any other biblical figure. You're killing evil, not a human. Straight up, like that is exactly what he said. And that I think is why Deus Vult from the First Crusades and Saint Bernard from the First Crusades are in like explicitly linked to far right, specifically anti-Islam fascists.
That makes perfect sense. I guess I just didn't think that these people would know anything, and that they would have gotten it
you
from a
wouldn't
video
think they
game.
would read, but sometimes they do, and it's
That's
scary.
incredible.
Listen, I hear there's translated fucking speeches from the Pope. I mean, that's a page turner. I'm picking that up.
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Wonderful. All right, so dipping back into the article for a bit. Quote,
Mhm.
the student in your class that knows what Prussia is the student that played Europa Universalis 4, Devereaux said.
True.
And second, unlike other cultural mediums, games are about systems. They're about the mechanics, Devereaux told me. Those systems and mechanics are how video games can teach people history. The presence of such mechanics, though, does not mean that players will necessarily understand them. Quote, the major challenge is getting players to recognize and think explicitly about these systems. Marion Cruz, an assistant professor of classics at the University of Cincinnati, and a dedicated gamer told me. So basically, yeah, it's like what we were talking about earlier. The presence of the fact that it has to be fun to play kind of ruins some of the historicity of it.
Yeah. There's one very like obvious example of mechanics trying to teach gamers something in Hearthstone 4 and them completely missing the fucking point.
Yeah.
And that's with how Hearthstone 4 is all about production. And because of that, and production and like resources that you need in order to produce at an efficient rate. So an army doesn't work unless it's got guns, unless it's got fuel and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And despite this, the gamers are like, well, Germany probably could have won if they had just done these, 5 things. Even though the game is constantly trying to tell you that Germany is in a position where it should not win because they don't have oil, they don't have like all these things that they need. Like their food production will not sustain them through a prolonged war with the entire world.
Right.
And the gamers are not sort of listening to this one thing that the game is actually trying to teach you in a very good way, in my opinion.
Yeah. That is something that's very interesting about these games, is that I guess it is like theoretically possible in these games, probably even like to win as the access.
It's not even that hard. You just have to know the mechanics,
which is
which
particularly
aren't necessarily
ridiculous, especially when it comes to like, I don't know. I don't know how many people want to play as Imperial Japan, because like the races who want to play the Axis are typically, don't want to play Japanese people unless they're
I think a lot
weebs.
of them are probably weebs. There's an
Yeah.
overlap, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I like to play, or I when I used to play this game, I haven't played in a long time, but I like to play as Imperial Japan because I like naval war,
Right.
and it's
Who the
them or
fuck
the
likes
US.
naval war? What the
I'm
hell?
fucking
What?
weird. I'm sorry.
What? What?
Carriers are fucking cool, okay?
I can't. I'm not gonna participate in this.
It's kind of interesting, but
I
like,
like
Don't
planes and I like
encourage
ships.
him.
but like from just a sheer logistics scale, like I'd like to listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast, and
Yeah, that's a fun one.
he gets into just how, like, from a logistics perspective, impossible it was for Japan to win this war, based on the fact that, like,
Oh yeah.
it took Japan like several years to put together its fleet, and like the United States was like cranking out like a new carrier every couple of months. Like, you can't compete on that same scale. Like, even if you manage to do like completely out strategize the US and completely beat them in major battles, like they're gonna bounce back like after like a year.
Yes. The big thing about Japan and the US confrontation in the Pacific is that Japan went to war with the US because they they needed oil and that to fuel their navy.
Mm.
And in order to beat the US, they need oil to fuel their navy. So essentially, they're
Yeah.
in like this catch-22, which only exists because they had imperial ambitions.
Right. I wanted to get back into this article because it mentions that Europa Universalis uses the mechanic of institutions such as the printing press and the Enlightenment, which appear in preset order at 50 years intervals, almost always in Europe, before slowly spreading around the world. Without these institutions, new technologies can be adopted only at much greater cost, meaning that over the centuries, Europe slowly pulls ahead of the rest of the world technologically. Player is taught that what made Europe exceptional was the adoption of these institutions, which allowed technological growth to flourish and thereby gave European countries the advantage that they used to dominate the world. Want to play as a non-European and still succeed? You had better be willing to kill, conquer, and colonize. In other words, do what the Europeans did. Europa Universalis, like most Paradox games, rewards playing in a ruthless expansionist way. I can't count the number of times I have started a game for some light historical entertainment before finding myself intensely waging war against my unsuspecting neighbors. If Europa Universalis is like an interactive encyclopedia, it is one that transmits an insatiable urge to delete half of its contents.
Great line.
Now that's a completely correct critique, but I love the idea of sitting down to play EU4 for some what do they say, light historical entertainment.
Yeah. I love my light historical
What?
entertainment.
Awesome.
The institutions thing there is a thing that I see way too much in certain history YouTuber like sort of circles. The guys I fucking hate.
Yeah.
Who like they focus so much on these institutions which of course are belonging and arising from Western traditional cultural values or whatever. These belong to us and other people are getting them from us, etc. And the people who are best at doing them like us are the people who are best, you know, who have the best countries, measured of course by GDP per capita.
Of course. The big number goes up and that makes you better, obviously.
Yeah.
And it is pretty ridiculous how it's like it just gives European countries like congratulations, you now have an institution, which it's like, I guess it's supposed to model like historically the invention of these, you know, creations like the printing press and shit, but
yeah,
it is very like silly how it just hands those out to the
there's like
the European
there's a
countries.
chance of you getting it, I think, based on like some stats. Of course, being in Western Europe then heavily sort of skews those stats in your favor. Like you get a weighted percentage or something. It's a very typical Paradox thing where technology sort of spreads out, like it appears in a place just sort of randomly or based on these like chances, and then spreads from there.
The next paragraph after that talks about how it's sort of myopic view of like the state as being central to historical change. There's actually an interesting comment below that. There's like, this view of history is myopic to say the least, and has led to some embarrassing shortcoming in the games. In previous editions of Europa Universalis, technological advancement was treated as inherently tied to a country's inclusion or exclusion from a, quote, Western technological group. Slavery, meanwhile, was relegated to the status of a minor historical footnote. In Hearts of Iron, the Holocaust and other atrocities are giving passion mention or left out entirely. I feel like the fact that slavery is just sort of like, yeah, it wasn't a big deal. Despite the fact that like during the colonial era, like slavery was like the mass extraction of insane amounts of wealth from the New World was built entirely on slavery.
Yeah, so Alton, it actually probably gets worse because unless it's changed or unless I'm misremembering, in Europa Universalis 4, each province, like each tile, has a resource that it contains, and each one contains one. And those resources can be gold, sugar, that kind of stuff, or they could be slaves.
Yeah,
so
they just found them on the tile.
Yes, that tile
Naturally
contains
occurring
slaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's growing straight out the ground.
Now, I think you get events that are like, okay, we can we can change our resource to slaves by enslaving the population, I think, or change it to something else by not doing that. But yes, like I think slavery is basically like a naturally occurring resource in that game, unless it's changed or I'm misremembering.
Christ.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, it's getting better though with these games because Victoria 3 does a lot of this stuff a lot better. Like, it doesn't have that Western tech group concept, or like Westernization isn't even a thing that's used as a concept in that game. Even though that is something that sometimes by some nations was something that thinkers in those nations believed in, like in Japan when they were trying to sort of emulate the West militarily and stuff like that.
Right.
But then because Victoria 3 did a few things better, it also generated some backlash, which me and you talked a little bit about.
I have a theory about Paradox that over the years, their staff or development team overall have gotten more left wing. And I think you see that in the way things are framed in games, but also how they tend to handle feedback. Because Paradox games are funny because there's probably no other type of game that has such a high volume of both communists and Nazis that play it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like, to their credit, they aren't taking on board much of the feedback from the fascist portion of their player base, from what I've seen.
Yeah. No, I've been like immersed in this, and they are not. But that's also because the fascists are just straight up wrong, and Paradox do employ some historical consultants.
Thank God for that.
Famously, history has a bit of a left-wing bias.
Yeah, it's funny that.
Because the fascists are just fucking morons who lie about everything for some reason.
Although I'm the historical consultant who told them that slaves are a naturally occurring resource to grow on a slave. Unfortunate.
They actually do get into this, and like the paragraph below that, the one I just read, is that Paradox has tried over the years of development to incorporate more historical complexity and nuance into its games. The company's many expansion packs for Europa Universalis, for example, have corrected historical errors and deepened gameplay in non-European parts of the world. So basically exactly what we said, exactly what you said earlier, Kay. And apparently Devereaux, who has found fault with many game developers' portrayal of history, says that among video game developers he has criticized, only Paradox has responded thoughtfully.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Because they clearly give a shit, if not about history, at least about, their reputation and connection to history.
Yes.
Most game devs will just be like, fuck off, stop being gay, I don't care. Tell me about things that have happened.
Tell me about things. This is a game. There's no like the thing that's the problem with like a lot of these games, is that because they're commercial products and they need to be marketed towards an audience, oftentimes what happens is like history takes like a backseat to sort of popular perception, I think.
Yes, and they want to be popularly perceived as the game for the history nerds. So when the history nerds are like, well, this is wrong, they have to fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
So lower down is like, often, of course, historical inaccuracy is impossible. Paradox games are ultimately games. And in many ways, Paradox is doing nothing new. The idea of learning from strategy games has its roots in 19th century Prussia, when officers trained in battlefield tactics using specially designed board games. When Prussians defeated France in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, these games were credited with their success and quickly spread across Europe.
Somebody's trying to hit a word count right now.
Yeah.
You think so?
I feel like that one was like
tangent come from?
Bit of a citation needed.
Yeah, that's true. That is quite the claim
Yeah.
that they attributed it to their board games. It's just like a bunch of Prussians sitting around a table. It's like, has he got a mustache? Nine.
Is that fucking Age of Sigmar?
He's just playing Guess
Yeah.
Who and just like,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
jawohl, das is what we used to beat the French.
Yeah, Franco-Prussian War Guess Who enthusiast. That's a good character. We should keep around, I think.
Just like a fucking board games nerd who's it's Russian board games nerd. It's like,
Yeah,
what is
he's gonna
that
teach you how to
fucking?
play Catan.
Yeah, it's like, mein Herr, have you ever played Settlers of Catan? It is so good. I don't know why board game enthusiasts are always hopping on Settlers of Catan's dick. That looks like a.
Well, isn't also Settlers of Catan like literally like a German tradition board game, as in like the type of board game? Like there's genres and stuff.
Oh,
so I think the
yeah.
Germans
Is
fucking
it?
love that shit.
Damn, Alton,
isn't
you
it?
nailed this bit. You're on it, man.
Oh,
One of
God.
those board games without RNG, because the Germans hate RNG, I think.
I will treat you one steel for a sheep.
Oh wait, fuck! You roll a die in Settlers of Catan. Sorry, the bit
Oh,
is
ruined
ruined.
it.
It's wrong.
Ruined
Yeah.
it. Shit game.
Terrible.
Delete this.
Awful game. Here's a really funny anecdote just inside the article. Jonas Sarugi, I'm butchering that, but it's the Danish names. Who gives you shit? A
Yeah,
Europa
get over it.
Universalis player who works in the Danish embassy in Turkey told me that he had to do a lot of quote unlearning after playing Paradox games.
When starting to work in a fucking embassy.
Yeah, I know. He found that the game's state-centric and linear view of historical development wasn't of much use in his professional life, which requires understanding the many nuances of Turkish history and culture. The games are a good starting point for learning about history, but given the current limitation, their history, quote, needs to be supported by other sources, he added.
Fuck, you know that
I-
guy said some crazy racist shit to some Turkish
Mm.
people when he started that job.
He's just talking about the Ottoman Empire and there's some random Turkish guy giving him a blank look.
If I was working at the Turkish embassy, I would simply not give this interview where I say that I had no fucking idea how history worked before I started
I had
working
to
here.
unlearn a bunch of Paradox games to do my job.
Oh yeah, he gives his name Jonas. You fucking idiot! Don't give your name for this.
Yeah, what the fuck?
You're gonna get fired, bro.
Oh my god. But Devereaux, despite his many public criticism of the games, thinks that historians should be delighted by their popularity. Games, he argues, are still better than many alternative ways of learning about history. Quote, video games engage with their history in a more thoughtful and robust way than in TV or in movies, he said. Players, quote, have their eyes focused on those historical processes, which, as a historian, is where we want them to be looking.
I agree.
So basically the end of this article is just like, yeah, people learn all kinds of shitty history from video games, but also it makes them enthusiastic about them.
I'm a lot more optimistic about Paradox, which processes and how it draws your attention to. I'm more enthusiastic about that in Victoria 3 than a lot of their other games, personally.
Yes.
I think
Hmm.
I have not played much of it because it's a Paradox game on release. You got to wait for 20 DLCs till it's good. That's how it works.
Yep. They recently released the Vladimir Lenin DLC.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Oh, nice.
I think John Brown is in there too. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I think so.
God,
A lot
that's
of radicals.
Does it cover?
Yeah.
Does it cover the period in which John Brown was alive?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's from what 1836 to 1918, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you get
Yeah,
the
it's
Civil War
Victorian.
and everything, and abolition, a bunch of like political movements and stuff, which I hope they will flesh out, because at the moment, my problem with that game, the big problem at least, is political movements are kind of constrained by nations. There
Right.
not really a very good representation of internationalism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It seems
Which-
like the mechanic they introduced with the Lennon and John Brown and co. Expansion was to have these sort of political agitators that aren't constrained nationally. Did that
they're still
help?
kind of constrained by national boundaries, though, in the sense that when they're sent into exile, they're sent to a specific nation, and that's where they go. So like they're not necessarily working across boundaries with other radicals in other countries, which of course is what happened in the period.
Okay.
One last thing to close out with from this article is lower down. It says games in particular are, quote, antithetical to apathy. Cruz said, if you play a game like Europa Universalis, quote, you're going to start caring about the past, even if it's in a relatively superficial way. Anything that can call attention to periods or histories that most people wouldn't otherwise come across does a very real service. Paradox games give their players an expansive, detailed, exciting, and yes, controversial way to dive into history, and that's more than you can say for most high school textbooks. Which I think that's a great point, and I want to go back to what we were talking about with the Ecumene Aztec game, and what an absolute fucking disappointment it is that it seems like there's basically, from what we can see, no real emphasis or caring about the historical accuracy.
Yeah, there's no curiosity. That's what's missing, is any fucking curiosity about it.
Yes.
And you see that when, they get pushback and they're like, oh, don't worry, we're not, our game's not political. We're not trying to say anything. We just thought they looked cool fighting in the jungle. Like,
to me, it kind of reads as like, well, this is a setting that Assassin's Creed hasn't done yet, so we can just use it for our set dressing. And it really does come across that way because, you've got like Assassin's Creed. It's done fucking Jerusalem during the Crusades. It's done fucking Renaissance Italy. It's done all these different fucking time periods and settings. And every single one is like a fucking theme park ride.
Yeah. And they're also going back to the Crusades, apparently.
Yeah. And it's like, it seems like they wanted to make an Assassin's Creed game based off of what we've read about it. And they were like, well, where can we do it that hasn't been done by Ubisoft yet? Or like their competitors like Ghost of Tsushima or something.
Yeah.
And for all the many valid criticisms we have of Ubisoft, one of the things that people have brought up is that they do actually put a great deal of effort into, if not making it historically accurate, at least having like some historicity in it. Like they have real historical characters. They have put a lot of effort into recreating like historical sites.
There's some like Karl authenticity to it.
Yeah, Karl Marx is like,
very funny.
You can't use violence. It's not the communist way.
Karl was always making apologies for the terror,
He said famously is like, when it's our time for the terror, we'll apologize and meekly go back home.
So I cyberstalked Jonas Shruji a little bit, and I would just like to reassure everyone, according to LinkedIn, he still is working in the embassy in Ankara.
Oh, thank
God. However, I find his claim that like he had this historical basis from Paradox games that he had to unlearn interesting, because he has a fucking bachelor's degree in history. What?
He's a fraud. He pretended to be stupid to be in the Atlantic article.
No, of course.
Jonas.
You just want to be in an article. Look, come on. Everyone wants to be famous. That's the most famous that history nerds can expect. It's either this or the infinitely less dignified History Channel talking head appearance.
Yes.
You're just there to
like
be
the consultant that shows up.
Yeah, you're like the counterpoint to the guy that says ancient aliens built the pyramids, and you show up there and was like, no, they didn't.
It's like, according to sources, I don't think this is likely.
And then the narrator says, there's no way to be sure what's true.
Yeah, exactly. You just get like this fucking crazy ass looking guy who's like, ancient aliens built the pyramids. And then the guy's like, no, that didn't happen. It's like, it's still controversial. The science hasn't been settled yet.
The debate rages on.
Yeah, fuck. I love American pop history. It's the worst dog shit imaginable.
Great. I love it.
And I want to say that, like, I don't know if this is more or less embarrassing. It probably about equal, maybe. Is that I can speak from firsthand that, video games did get me interested in World War II history. I don't think I would have gotten into World War II if it wasn't for Medal of Honor Rising Sun, which is, in terms of historicity, pretty dubious.
No, it's 100% accurate. That's got my seal of approval.
There probably wasn't like a patrol boat with like a quad 50 mounted on it that like took down like 20 Japanese Zeros during D-Day.
Yeah, but like, do you have a source that for sure says there wasn't though?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna say that happened. And you know what? I'm prepared to stake the reputation of my university on it. They endorse that as that's peer reviewed.
I think it's very likely that Ancient Aliens might have caused
we reviewed it.
Ancient Aliens might have actually caused Pearl Harbor.
D-Day?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ancient Aliens did Pearl Harbor.
I think we've basically run out of time. I think this had been a really great discussion, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has.
I was hoping I would actually get more rizzed for getting into World War II via the medium of Medal of Honor, because it's such a silly way to get into history at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can. I was trying to think if I could criticize you for that before I started doing so, because I feel like I also got kind of. I mean, I played Call of Duty, like one of the early ones on PlayStation 2, and got sort of traumatized because of a scene where like a dude gets crushed by a tank.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and like that was my first, I think, World War II type game. But I think I was like already into history before that because my aunt and her and my granddad was a historian. They went to Egypt and brought back like a bunch of like books on Egypt and ancient Egypt. I don't remember any of the actual specifics of the period and all that of what I was reading on, but I was a kid reading about ancient Egypt, and I got sort of fascinated with history from that, I think.
Well, Egypt is one of those ones where I think it is very easy to get swept up into it because there's a lot of like children's books like eyewitness history that have like these really beautiful photographs of like preserved sarcophaguses. And I think that's one of the big reasons is that, they have all this, the Egyptians managed to like preserve like a significant chunk of their culture in these tombs that were not fucked with by Europeans until at least relatively recently. You get like the full color of that culture in a way you don't get with like so many other places. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like like the Aztecs.
Exactly. Yeah, I think every kid in the 90s at least had like a period where they're like, oh my God, Egypt is so cool.
Yes.
And it is cool. Egyptian history is great. But anyway, I think we should wrap things up. It's been like an hour and 40 minutes. We had a couple other topics that we wanted to talk about, but we'll get to those in a later episode. Fred, I'd like to thank you for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a really great discussion. I hope the listeners have enjoyed this. So tell our wonderful listeners where they can find more of your great content on the internet.
So my great content where I bitch and moan about people and doing bad history and stuff on YouTube, you can find either on twitter.com/ineptfredda. That was me trying to figure out how to get Fredda, but also that being taken. So many such cases. And also YouTube / I think, it's Fredda YT, I think. YouTube.com/Fredda YT. That's where I do all my videos.
And Kay, where can people find you bitching about bad history on the internet?
Yeah, if somehow you didn't get your fix from Fredda, then hit me up on Twitter at KNSkittles and the very same on YouTube. In fact, it probably won't be out yet when this episode drops, depending. We'll see. There will be a video soon where I actually make an argument for why you should care about history as a field of study. And that's why I can't give Alton shit for getting into history from Medal of Honor, because if anyone gets into history from watching a YouTube video, that's worse. But that is the goal.
True. I'm subscribing because I'm excited for that.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely recommend people check out Fredda's video on how Dwarf Fortress abandoned capitalism, embraced communism. Great video. Your latest video about Liberal Crime Squad is very good because I'd heard lots about that as a fan of Dwarf Fortress, but never actually looked into it or played it. And so it was good to actually learn what the heck that is.
Very funny game.
It sounds like a fun game just from the premise alone. And go ahead and check out KNSkittles videos. One of my favorite is like the neoliberal dystopian hellscape of Fallout. capitalist realism in Fallout, I think.
Oh, that's a classic.
As a classic, and then of course the videos on Korra and how shitty the politics are of that show. And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Rude Fox Alton. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitch. And you can find me on Twitter. And you can find me on Blue Sky now, because Reese was kind enough to give me...
I'm not jealous.
I'm hoping that I'll get some more invites to hand out soon, but stay tuned for that. For $1 a month gets you access to all our premium content on Patreon, like our Mountain Dew Horror Stories episode, which is a banger, if I may say so myself. Video games are okay, maybe, where we actually talk about video games that we like for once. You can find our podcast at videogamesaretheworst.pinecast.co and all major podcast applications. And anyway, I'd like to thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye. And then you two say bye too.
Bye.
Bye.